Hello everybody, and welcome to the latest Lunchtime Bites webinar from the ICBE Advanced Productivity SkillNet. Today our presenter is Sean Brady from CloudAssist, covering the topic area of tips and tricks for remote working with Microsoft Teams. Sean is the co-founder of CloudAssist, which is a 10-year-old Microsoft Cloud partner assisting enterprises to migrate and adopt Office 365. CloudAssist is a 100% remote working organization for the last 3 years with teams in 4 countries across 3 continents, assisting global companies across the world, and has completely embraced this new way of working with a fully remoteless organization where everyone works from a home office. To go even further with remote working, 2 years ago, CloudAssist implemented a no-visit policy where they no longer visit their clients and their clients no longer visit them. So all their work is delivered remotely via Microsoft Teams. Over the course of 20 minutes, Sean will cover some of the collaboration basics of Microsoft Teams, including chat, meetings, file sharing, task management, amongst others. The ground rules for today, Sean will present for approximately 20 minutes, finishing up with a 10-minute Q&A. And this is our first time to use Microsoft Teams for this event, so we're very excited about that. And if you see the Q&A function on the right-hand side, please input questions and answers there, but we will be dealing with questions and answers that have been sent in at the end of the webinar. And with no further ado, I will hand you over to Sean.
Thank you very much, Owen. Yeah, I'm delighted today to be able to share our experience of remote working with, and of course, using Microsoft Teams. But the reality is the way we work has changed, and of course, it's changed very dramatically over the last few weeks. Again, everyone has heard about remote working all of a sudden, but what I found as well, speaking to clients who haven't been remote working up until now, it really isn't remote working, it's working from home in a crisis. And I'm hoping these tips and tricks today will help you, either if you're a well-established remote worker, looking at obviously helping improve your productivity in Teams, or if Teams have been thrust upon you in the last few weeks in this crisis to help you obviously continue to work. So obviously this is what a lot of our workplaces look like, and I imagine you're the same, where you're at home, you've created an office space for yourself, and of course it's different to work from home. Obviously broadband would be a challenge, but also we have our first tip, which is if you have a noisy environment with dogs and children, I would recommend a noise cancelling headset, which also helps you reduce the impact of ambient noise when you're on Teams. But here's the reality, where we working in person. Obviously, as Owen mentioned, we are no longer visiting our clients for the last 2 years, so this is nothing new to us, but it's been a big shift for people in the last few weeks. Now having to obviously no longer work in an office, but work from home, but also trying to continue to work with relationships in and outside of the organization. And say this is what we're obviously proposing to do today, is look at Teams and how Teams could be used for that purpose. And the good news is, out of 85% of the ICBE members, out of the 85% of you from ICB are actually using Microsoft Office 365. Therefore, you have Teams. So I hope maybe a lot of people already is using Teams, or maybe you've just actually started doing so. So what are we going to cover today? First of all, we're going to cover communication for Teams, and also then file sharing, task management, and we will roughly touch on how to document your teamwork, because these are the 4 cornerstones of remote working, no matter what platform you use. But today we'll show you how effective Microsoft Teams is in achieving them 4 cornerstones in remote working. So first of all, Teams obviously sets up team communications in multiple ways. One, first of all, is a meeting. And maybe a lot of you have already been doing that over the last few weeks. You also have the function chat, where you can do what's called persistent chat between 1 or more people. And then we have channels, which obviously have now been recently changed to the term posts. It used to be called conversations, now it's called posts within Teams. And this is very important to know where you should be communicating and obviously to who. So first, obviously, look at meetings. So you'll all see this Brady, like what they call the Brady Bunch view. I think Microsoft may have named that term after myself, where you see a lot of people in one single view. And our first tip, our real tip is to use video. Okay, if you're obviously in a remote situation, to create that connection, switch on your video. I know some people say, well, my environment has changed. You can actually now use a blur function within Microsoft Teams, which actually actively blur out your background. So if your washing is hanging up, you can actually blur it out and therefore continue to use video. So first thing I would like to cover off is the team meeting experience and what it looks like. So you're presented with this control panel you can see highlighted in blue, where you can hide your video, mute. You can also share your desktop or application, which is very, very powerful. Really, that's the real power of a Teams meeting. You can also add chat and files, and also manage the attendees. You can mute them, or you can also pull someone into a meeting. So if your original meeting required an extra person to contribute, you can pull that person in actively without having to stop and restart the meeting. You also have some options here for your settings, but as I said earlier, it's good to have a good Teams certified headset, so that when you do switch on, you're not looking for your audio settings, that every time it works. Now our tip actually has been provided to us by Aidan Kelly from ICBE. He pointed out to me, which is a fact that is very important to remember, that this control bar or command bar is actually hides itself after a certain number of seconds when you're on a video. And so you have to move your cursor to bring back up. And that can be very disconcerting for some people, saying, well, where's the off button? Where's the hang up button? Where's the mute button? Just move your cursor and this will appear. And this actually catches a lot of people out in their first meetings. So the next point in communications is chat. And chat is can be done one-to-one or to groups. And I'll make that very clear distinction. One-to-one obviously is great because you can just ask a quick question of someone directly and they can reply back. We would also like to point out there's actually 3 tips here. So the first thing is groups. A group chat is often missed by a lot of Teams users. And this is a great way of putting an ad hoc workplace or workspace together without creating a team. And what we were trying to do is always avoiding team sprawl. Too many teams in Teams is not a good thing. So if you have a very kind of loose requirement for collaboration with a few people, like we had with, we were collaborating with the ICBE, with Owen, and people in CloudAssist to create this webinar today, we used a group rather than creating a team, because it was going to be very short-lived collaboration with an end goal. And the final tip I want to give here as well is, rather than replying all the time, you can sometimes like a post, like a chat. And this actually helps you to respond quickly to someone's point without having to type back a message. You can also save the message, which is great when you're looking at maybe an employee appraisal in maybe 6 months' time. You can save a message that you say, I want to bring that up because it was a very positive contribution to the team, and it helps you obviously keep a track of what's going on, so you don't have to scroll back over thousands and thousands of chats. So the next one under the pillar of communication is channel posts. As I said, it used to be called conversations, now it's called posts. And this is important. I want to explain what a channel is, right, first, before I talk about posts. So a channel is, the way to describe it is, a team is like a house, and each channel is a room in that house. So everyone who enters the house can obviously enter and see the rooms. Now, some rooms are going to be locked, and they're going to be called private channels. And each channel has a group of people in it. And then when you post, everyone in that channel can see it. So it's like a semi-public post to a set audience. So every time you post in the channel, everyone in the channel can see it. So, and again, that was the tip. So I'm going to recap meetings, and because we have a little questionnaire that we're going to pose to you in a moment. So first of all, if you want to have an ad hoc meeting, you can do so in chat. You can actually, while you're doing a chat with someone and you find that it's going back and forth, and my rule is if there's 3 or 4 chats in quick succession on a single subject, it's a good time to get on a call and actually discuss it. So you can do so within chat. It's called an ad hoc meeting. Then you can have a standalone meeting, which you can schedule in either your Teams or in Outlook. In fact, if you go to your Outlook, you can actually schedule a team with a bunch of people either in and outside of your organization. And that's great, or you can obviously have that functionality both in Outlook and in Teams. And then finally, in a channel. As I said to you, a channel is like a set audience. So you can host a meeting for a specific subject without having to invite everyone individually. Everyone in the channel will be sent a meeting request. So based on that understanding, here's a scenario where I want you to think about for a moment, and we'll ask a question. So you have 5 members, different roles, different time zones, a very, very set deliverable, 2 in this case, and a very set time scale. So it's very short, what I would call an ad hoc collaboration. And of course, as I said earlier, the best place to do that is in a chat-based workspace rather than setting a team. This is where, again, I keep talking about team sprawl. Very simple way to avoid that, and it's a common mistake, but too many people creating too many teams, and it just gets out of hand. The next scenario that I want to describe is a team where it's looking to create a virtual training, which I imagine is very prominent at the moment. So you have separate working teams, all with different members. You've got a lot of global time zones in place, a lot of processes to be managed, and of course multiple applications to be utilized, and with an ongoing time scale. So ongoing. So in that case, that does warrant a team, and also creating a separate channel within that for this specific project. And then finally, this is a scenario which is quite a bigger scenario. You have lots of, it's like a town hall really, where you have a quarterly town hall. You have lots of attendees, 1,000 in this case. You would actually have lots of contributors from different departments, and also different applications and files being used. And in this case now, I would again use a chat or channel, but also because we're now in this new world where it has to be virtual, that's going to be obviously done online, I would consider a live event. And this is what we're using today for this event, for this webinar, is actually a live event. It's an extra feature in Teams. So worth checking out. So next cornerstone is document sharing or file sharing. And this is a feature that's standard across all experiences within Teams. There's always files. So you can upload a file either in chat or in a channel where you can actually do so. And then, of course, keep a single version, this master version or version control, something that you cannot do with email. So imagine if you sent an email with an attachment to 10 people, you've got essentially now 10 versions coming back at you. With Teams, this is one of the real powerful pieces that you can achieve quite easily with Teams. And of course, the tip is when you're looking at your structure, be very careful about where you put your files and how you structure your files, because every site, every team creates a SharePoint site collection. So SharePoint is in the back end. Files are not stored in Teams. They're stored in either SharePoint or OneDrive for Business. So know where your files are and also how you're structuring them and who has access to them, very importantly. So task management. Again, this is where, unlike chat and files I've just spoken about in meetings, they're all what I call default features that happens the minute you create any team in Teams. You must add Planner. And I would recommend you add Planner to every team, because every team needs to have task management, especially with remote working. And that can be done so by adding that as a tab in your channel. And then, of course, you can also add OneNote. And this is where we talked briefly about documenting your teamwork. Every team, in my opinion, should have OneNote associated with it, so you can document what you're doing. And therefore, there's a reference. It's great to have the chat and the conversations and posts, but it's great also to have a structured way to document your teamwork. So you're not searching back and forth over thousands of chats to find a piece of information. So what does Planner look like? So it looks like it's a bucket. In fact, that's what they call it. And this is what the tip for today with Planner is, that you should use the bucket feature to actually set up your actions into groups. And then each group then obviously can be assigned to a single user or group of users. It can be set with a time scale, so there is a deadline for associated with that, and that will all appear in that person's activity list, and also be sent an email as well to remind them they have a late task. It's a great way to manage your task all within the Teams experience. And of course, you can also add notes to every task. So it's not just saying do this. You can actually add a whole bunch of supporting pieces of information and files and other obviously information to help them with that task. And of course, it gives you a quick view of where you are, and you can, once you set complete, it will remove it from the view that you see here. So that's Planner. It's very, very powerful. And what we have here then is the OneNote experience. So OneNote, it looks like, as you can see here, like a tab on top of your channel. And you can click on that at any time and add notes to a whole bunch of different subject matters, but also it will be available to everyone in that channel. And that's the beauty of it. Each channel will have its own notes associated. So it's not just one single repository for your notes. It's each channel has its own notes. So that's the tip there, obviously, is to add that as a standard where you can actually use a template every time you set up a team. You can actually design a template that will add it, both OneNote and Planner. And that's my tip for the day, to do so. So rather than leaving it to the user, make sure Planner and OneNote is always assigned. So here's some extra tips to go before I finish up. One is as I said before, and I cannot state this enough, stress this point, it's the biggest problem we see with teams is that it's too easy to create teams. And of course, too many teams just creates confusion and obviously turns people off. So my recommendation is actually control who can add a team. I know it sounds a bit restrictive, but it's very, very good way of making sure that people justify and think about their teams and what they should be doing. So make it, this point here, be deliberate when you're setting up a chat, a team, or a channel. So don't just, because it's easy, do it. Start simple, grow as needed. And as an organization, you need to create awareness and support and give guidance to people on how to use teams. Otherwise, it will become a bit of a Wild West, and it will become effectively or ineffective to what you're trying to achieve with remote working. And of course, the ultimate thing here for us is email avoidance. One of the biggest tips I could give you today is, once you set up a team, stop emailing the team. And I know it's hard because we're all creatures of habit and we're all addicted to email. And unfortunately, it only takes one person to email a group, and all of a sudden it erodes the team's experience. And then what you'll find is people stop communicating in teams and they go back to email again. It's one of the biggest challenges of Teams adoption today. And what we've done in CloudAssist, we've developed a solution called Teams Assist, which actually helps you while you're writing an email. It will look in your distribution list and see if a resemblance to who you're sending the email to is already in existence in Teams, and we'll also look at your email and see if there's a relevance. The subject matter you're writing about has a relevance to the channel or channels that you've set up, and we'll actually stop you and say, we call it the oi moment. We go, oi, does this really need to be sent, or should it be moved? And it has saved me so many times in my early adoption of Teams, because we give a pledge to our clients that once we start our process working, helping them, we will never email them again. We'll always use Teams and keep the Teams experience going. So the next, I'd say I've given a lot of tips, but I haven't given a trick. So here's my trick for today. If you go to the top of Teams into the command box, which you see here at the top, and put in the command with a / keys, you'll get all these keyboard shortcuts. And there's a whole bunch of them in there, and it's well worth actually learning some of them. For me, the zoom capability is essential, especially when you're sharing your screen. You're trying to share something very small within Teams. Text can be very small when you're trying to share that with someone else. You can now zoom in and zoom out, so you can actually zoom in on something that you need to highlight to someone. And of course, what we also talk about is the user adoption journey. There's no way to get on top of Teams in a day or in a week. It's a journey, because Teams is always changing. New features are being added all the time. Teams is now 3 years old this month, 3 years, and we've been on that journey with them, with Microsoft, and it's changed, all the time and new things happening. But what you want to do is make sure you understand the adoption challenge that you're going to face if you have obviously just switched on Teams today or in the last few weeks, where there's been no formal planning, no formal training. And what you're going to get, first of all, and this is standard for all systems, it's not just Teams, this happens with all software. What you first of all get is the shock. And then once people pass over the shock where we are today, this shock of this new way of working, you start getting resistance. And then people get frustrated because they don't know what they're doing. And then it leads to anger, and they go back to what they were doing before. And that's the danger that we want to avoid. And it's very important to recognize that in, first of all, being clear about what you're going to want people to do in Teams. Don't try and boil the ocean. Just give them the 4 cornerstones, as I've mentioned today, and just do that to start with. Start small, start simple. And then empathize with them, because this is hard. We're in a crisis. It's all up in evil at the moment, and now we're adding a new thing called Teams to make them communicate remotely. So we have to give them obviously a way of helping them. And our adoption services for CloudAssist is built on 3 elements. Build, first of all, you must assess the use cases. Don't go off willy-nilly and creating teams without some kind of framework that aligns to your business. And these use cases can be quite small or could be quite complicated. But remember, sometimes Teams is not the right application as well. So don't use Teams for everything. Teams is for what we call frequent interaction with a team or a cross-functional team or over a period of time. And this is one thing I want to stress again, is security. Out of the box, Teams is a bit loose, and therefore you need to make sure you're not oversharing. And we have to actually really highlight this to clients who are using Teams for the first time, that the security features within Microsoft is incredibly powerful, but unfortunately they're not switched on by default. So identity management, device management, information protection, these are all built into your Office experience, but unfortunately have to be configured. And finally, then, once you built your use cases, you've enabled the team configuration correctly, then engage the users and help them to obviously learn best practices. And this is what we call the Busy Bee program, because everyone's busy. But if you keep that mantra in mind, build, enable, engage, then you're going to be obviously get a much more better structure to your team's experience. So, and these are the offers. We actually, with Microsoft, have an offer where today you can create a teamwork assessment with 3 use cases, which are funded by Microsoft. And this is where we would like to talk to people in the ICBE and see how we can help under that funding. Now, there is eligibility requirements that you must meet to achieve that, but also the security setup will also be done as a Microsoft funded exercise, making sure that whatever you're doing with Teams is secure. And then finally, the Teams adoption journey, that's an ongoing thing. It's, always think of it like it's not a destination. It's definitely something you have to continually work on and continually help and empathize with users who may take on Teams and then fall back into bad habits. And then finally, for the 15% of the ICBE members who are not on Office 365, there is a free E1 Teams for everyone in the audience, which is for 6 months. Microsoft just announced that there in the last week or so. And you can contact us if you want more information on that. And let's say finally, we don't do training. CloudAssist is not an end user training company. What we are doing is working typically with your business decision makers, looking at your security, so working with your admin, and then working with HR to look at how adoption frameworks can be best implemented with champion programs and other incentives. But we have partnered with Priority Management, and they provide end user productivity training to help you and get the best out of the of Microsoft Teams from an end user perspective. And again, ICBE are offering funding supports for that. So again, finally, this is where we think build, enable, engage. This is the 3 aspects that you need to think about: the capability, the knowledge, and motivation. You've got to motivate people to take on a new system such as Teams, and make sure that they continually sustainably use that going forward as a new way of working. And again, this is change management 101. It happens with all systems, but because of the crisis we're in now, I think we need to put special attention to that, because people obviously are struggling at home. We need to help them. And of course, as I mentioned, enable security, device management, information protection, and identity management. It's all there, but here's the problem. Teams is available across all devices on any time, anywhere. And what happens if a device got lost? What happens if an identity gets hacked? What happens if your information is overshared? These are the kind of things you must think about before the horse bolts. And this is where obviously we can help with our secure collaboration. But I see this as an opportunity. This change that we have all obviously going through at the moment, we can actually use that as an opportunity to turn into a competitive advantage with better teamwork. And because obviously this is the adversity that we're up against, this is the opportunity where using remote working techniques, we can be actually more productive. The science and studies show remote working gives at least 25, 20 to 30% greater productivity per user. That's a very interesting statistic, and I would recommend you go to Grow Remote, which is an organization in Ireland supporting remote working, growremote.ie, and you'll hear more about these studies. Incredibly powerful. So remote working is a good thing. That's what I want to put across. And of course, this is a very interesting, it was told to me recently that crises in Chinese is made up of 2 symbols: danger, yes, and of course, opportunity. And this is what I want to hopefully work on today and help with people. And I'll leave you with one final tip. In Teams, there's context. So if you go to your chat function and click over to context, we can see there beside recent, you can actually add people, even outside of your organization, if you're set up for external communication. And external communication should not be confused with guest access, which is a totally different security policy. You should be, in my opinion, opening up that, because there's people want to talk to you, and there's a lot of other people on Teams. So it's a great way of actually saying, hello, hi, I see you're on Teams. And they go, yes, great, I'm on Teams too. And so you can do that. And of course, I would also recommend you add groups. So otherwise you get a whole list of names and you won't be able to find them. So add each of your key businesses that you want to work with outside of your organization and add some names and see what comes up. And what you'll find is, if they're available, there'll be a little green bubble beside their name. And then you can say, obviously reach out to them and say hello. So we're now ready for Q&A. So Owen, I don't know how we did on time.
We're a little bit over on time, but anyway, let me start the Q&A by first apologizing that we can't take live Q&A via live meeting today. It's a feature that sometimes comes on and off, but we did have a number of questions that came in advance. And one question around calendar and the calendar function. Yep. So rather than ending up with multiple calendars to control and to update, if people update the calendar within Teams, does it automatically update their other calendars?
Oh, calendars. Okay, right.
First so you can imagine you have a calendar that you use for work normally, and then one for Teams.
Yeah. Now the one thing that Microsoft has done very well is linking all of the workloads, including Outlook, to Teams. So your calendar in Outlook is the same as it is in Teams, provided obviously you're using the same email address, right? So I know some people have other calendars under their personal devices, on personal emails, that will not show. So the only thing that will show in Teams is the email that you sign in on, and it's a single sign-on as well. So you can't sign in on with multiple email addresses. So yes, so just to recap, yes, it appears in Outlook. So if you create a team meeting in Teams, it will appear in your Outlook, and if you do so in Outlook, it will appear in your Teams, just for that email address.
Great, thanks for clarifying that, John. Another question, a few questions around files. You alluded to where the files were kind of stored area, but some of the specific questions were around if you make changes to a document in Teams in the files, Does that sync with other places where those documents reside, and where should people find them?
Yes, again, I think it's the one frustration that people have when we're looking at files. What happens is with Teams sits on top of SharePoint Online. I made that clarification. So SharePoint Online, you may have SharePoint in your organization, but that may be on an on-prem server. That's not the same as SharePoint Online. SharePoint Online is built into Office 365. So therefore, when you create a file structure in Teams, it creates a site collection, SharePoint site collection in your SharePoint Online. And every file folder that you create under that creates a corresponding one in the site collection. And interestingly enough, it also changes when you change the name of the file, but it doesn't change the name of the folders. And so you got to be very careful about when you set up your team file structure. You need to put a bit of thought in, be deliberate, as I said earlier, be deliberate with how you set up Teams, but also how you set up your files. And then just to clarify, when you're in a chat, which also has a file button or tab at the top, when you upload a file in chat, it doesn't upload to SharePoint, it uploads up to your OneDrive for Business. So again, it's not in SharePoint, it's in OneDrive for Business. So again, be very deliberate and think about where your SharePoint is already today, and how you're going to obviously migrate to SharePoint Online, or if you're going to have a SharePoint structure online already, make sure it's not breaking something already, that any file, what we call site collection policies that you've already put in place.
Great, thanks very much, Sean. Two more questions, two quite specific ones. First, how do you set up Microsoft Teams to call your home number when you are joining a meeting?
Yes, that's audio conferencing, which is an add-on feature to Teams. So in that case, where someone wants to obviously be pulled into a call just for audio, and people do that for two reasons. One, their internet goes down and they can't get on. Unfortunately, home internet is really suffering at the moment. A lot of people are struggling with home internet. The bandwidth that you had previously is being hammered, unfortunately, by your neighbors who are watching Netflix, and maybe your own router is being hammered by your own children online at the time. So audio conferencing is a kind of like a safety net. So you can actually say, well, okay, I can't get on the call online, but I can join it by audio conferencing. So you need to add a audio conference license to your Teams, and that will allow you then to do so. Now you can also, with audio conferencing, actually pull someone in. For example, you're obviously on a meeting and you know this person's not online at the time. You can actually ring their mobile, and that will add their audio to your meeting. So it can dial in and dial out to an audio Microsoft Teams meeting.
Great.
Oh, sorry, there was a second question as well, wasn't there? Sorry.
Yeah, there's one more question. When in a call using Microsoft Teams, is it possible to set it up such that when one exits the call, it also exits Microsoft Teams?
Okay, well, very simply, the easiest way to do that is to join the meeting as through a web browser, which creates a kind of I suppose an instance of Teams, and the minute you leave Teams, then Teams is switched off. So it's through the web browser option. But in my opinion, you want to create and download the Teams app, and also add it to your taskbar, so it's sitting there, because every time someone mentions you or likes your post, or even chats, try to create a chat between you, the actual icon in your taskbar lights up. You'll also have a little number associated with it. For those who are actually using it, you'll see a little number, and that'll tell you maybe the amount of activity that you need to be thinking about in your planning, and also maybe posts that you hadn't read yet. So it's a very good thing. In my opinion, you should have Teams on your desktop, on your taskbar, so you can see it at all times and stay in Teams. That's the beauty of it. I want to leave with this kind of final point. Like, Teams is an all-in-one workplace. It brings your meetings, chats, notes, documents, calendars tasks, dashboards, and much more, all into one workspace. So stay in that workspace and you'll find it much more easier to get used to, get more familiar with it.
Great. Okay, so if there's no further questions, I don't stand between people on lunch anymore. Today was just a very quick run through a small fraction of the potential functionality of Microsoft Teams. As Sean alluded to earlier, the ICBE will have an offer with priority training next week. It'll be released next week about working remotely and using Teams and some of the other collaborative technology. I believe we'll have the video of this available for people later on. And finally, Sean, thank you very much for all those insights, and to everyone who attended today, thank you very much for attending, and look forward to seeing you at the next Lunchtime Bites.
Thank you very much, Owen.